the summer of 1996, the Premier League was in the midst of a foreign revolution. 1992's formation of the Premier League and Sky's financial backing in the form of increased television money, plus added commercial benefits from merchandising, etc., led to Premier League sides having more money than ever before. However, it had proven difficult for the first few years to convince foreign international players to come to England with its cold weather and harsh physical play compared to the main import leagues of Italy and Spain. The year before, Arsenal had signed Dennis Bergkamp from Inter Milan for £7.5 million, and Chelsea had brought in Ruud Gullit from Sampdoria. Arguably, players were seeing the success of a certain Frenchman at Manchester United and wanted a piece of the pie. Q 1996. Ruud Gullit had been signed on as player-manager to become only the third foreign manager in the new English top-flight competition, and conflicts in the Arsenal boardroom over transfers were leading to an inevitable collapse between Bruce Rioch and Vice-Chairman David Dein. 7 years prior, Arsene Wenger had gone to Arsenal to get a taste for English football during Monaco's winter break. What followed was David Dein inviting Wenger to dinner, a game of charades, and the following lovely quote. "I thought, this guy's something special. He's a bit different." Just then it was like a flash of lightning. I sort of saw in the sky, Arsene for Arsenal. It's destiny. One day he will be our manager. So when rumblings of disagreement started being heard from Rioch's office about him not having control over transfers, Ian Wright putting in a transfer request, and two unknown Frenchmen were being signed, Remy Gard and a 20-year-old Patrick Vieira, the writing was on the wall. Later on, we discovered that Dein had Wenger penciled in to be Arsenal manager since George Graham's departure in 1995, but that the rest of the board weren't keen on a foreign manager. Needless to say, it's since become apparent that the summer of 1996's transfer dealings that made Rioch's position so untenable were planned in advance with Arsene Wenger. That didn't stop the bookmakers having Johan Cruyff down as the favourite to take the job, but the close personal bond between Wenger and Dein sealed the deal, and the somewhat unknown Frenchman was appointed in October of that year. Starting his management career at AS Nancy in 1984, tight budget constraints meant little to him, as the side predicted to be relegated pre-season, finished mid-table, and Wenger's stock was high. The refusal of the board to invest in the playing team, sound familiar, after selling key players meant that Wenger's stock was still high despite relegation the season after. Think Roberto Martinez at Wigan. Monaco then came calling in 1986. In keeping with what we now know to be his speciality, he looked outside of the domestic game for his two immediate high-profile signings, which also foretold his admiration of the English game, as Glenn Hoddle and Mark Hateley arrived from Tottenham and AC Milan respectively. Monaco won the league in their first season under Wenger, but the rebuilding projects with new money at Marseille and PSG were well underway, and the trophy cabinet of Monaco didn't fill up from there. In the summer of 1988, a certain George Weah was brought in for a measly £12,000 from Cameroon upon the recommendation of Cameroon's national team coach Claude Leroy, who had seen the youngster playing for Liberia. Subsequent failures to retain the league title increased the pressure on Wenger's position, but cup performances kept him in a job, including losing the Cup Winners' Cup final of 1992. However, a terrible start to the 1994 season left Monaco in 17th place, and Wenger out of a job. It's at this time that Bayern Munich were apparently interested in the Frenchman, but David Dein had already been in his ear about Arsenal and was just waiting for the right time to pounce. In the meantime, Wenger saw an opportunity to experience new cultures and working methods by accepting a lucrative offer to manage Nagoya Grampus 8 in Japan. A few cup wins amongst topsy-turvy league table finishes meant he could leave Japan with his reputation intact, but it certainly wasn't a spell to make him sought after by any clubs that hadn't researched his highly professional and modern techniques to coaching. At first, I thought, what does this Frenchman know about football? He wears glasses and looks more like a school teacher. He's not going to be as good as George Graham. Does he even speak English properly? Said Tony Adams. Such was the ignorance surrounding foreign coaches and ideas in the English game at the time. Euro 96 and Sky Sports had done wonders to boost the profile of the Premier League. and yet the game itself in England was very much still left behind in the 1980s. The days of 442, the crazy gang, drinking cultures, and still fighting an ongoing battle against hooliganism. But change was coming. Cantona, Gullit and Bergkamp were big proponents of that, but no major shift was going to occur in the English game until club management changed towards a continental model, and Wenger was the first real step towards that at Arsenal. The banning of team group drinking, the improvement of players' diets, as well as regular vitamin and creatine supplements and injections, were the first real committed steps to implementing sports science into the English top-flight game, and the results were almost immediate. In 1998, Arsenal won the double under Wenger's tutelage. The summer prior, he had instigated a French revolution with the signings of Grimandi and Petit from his old club Monaco to supplement the fast-tracking of Vieira into the first team. On top of this, a young Nicolas Anelka joined from PSG for £500,000, and then Mark Overmars was drafted in from Ajax for in between 5 and 7 million, depending on sources. The building of Wenger's ideal squad continued with the signings of Thierry Henry, Davor Schuker and Kanu, refreshing his front line. And although it took some time to make the squad gel, when it did, the team was quite literally invincible. Wenger's transfer strategy, even for English football, was well ahead of its time. Over his tenure, he utilised an established scouting network in France, and especially Africa, where players like Aboué and Touré were found. A key aspect of Wenger's transfer policy, however, was his ability to attract players unhappy at their current club and give them the foundation to correctly showcase their talent. From Vieira's failed Milan move, Overmars' contract dispute with Ajax, Kanu's unhappy short spell at Inter Milan, Sol Campbell's desire for silverware, Anelka's desire to break into first-team football, to Thierry Henry's injury and racism-ravaged spell at Juventus. All players deeply unhappy and promised the world by Wenger around the turn of the millennium. All players that became World Cup winners, invincibles, and global superstars. Conversely, Wenger also had plans for player sales too. One of the risks with signing so many players that showed signs of being upset at their old clubs is that regardless of success, they may get upset in the future. As a result, Arsenal quickly became the masters of retention value, and questions were asked about their necessary succession planning. Anelka was the first to throw his toys out of the pram and threatened to refuse to play unless a sale to Real Madrid happened. £23.5 million later, and he jetted off to sunny Spain. A self-imposed wage cap on squad players, as well as a public insistence that players would not stay at the club if they entered the final year of their contract with no assurances to stay on, led to several departures, including Petit and Overmars to Barcelona in the summer of 2000. Patrick Vieira's departure to Inter Milan in 2005 was perhaps the biggest breakup of the initial Wenger team assembly, and initiated a shift in mentality at the helm of the club. In 2006, Arsenal lost the Champions League final to Barcelona, and arguably that moment signalled the beginning of a rapid decline at the club, only held together by the bond and understanding the manager had with his squad. Arsenal had been planning a relocation from Highbury since 1997, but it was only in 2000 that they managed to secure the purchase of land at Ashburton Grove. The new stadium was initially supposed to be ready in 2002, and then financial difficulties hit and the relocation was delayed until 2004. This was partially due to the club insisting on financing the move themselves rather than rely on outside investment. A bold move for such a large construction project in London. £390 million, roughly £620 million adjusted to inflation, and a further 2 years later, and Arsenal moved into the new Emirates Stadium. 2006 was the year to signal Arsenal moving forward into a bright future with a shiny new stadium that would be the envy of the land. But the crippling financial pressure of this move would take its heavy toll as the board put pressure on Wenger to reduce the playing staff budget and withdrew substantial financial support to replace them. Initially, the necessary player sales weren't huge hits due to the players in reserve ready to take their places. Flamini and Coquelin's arrivals, plus Fabregas and Wilshere's emergence, was a significant change of style, but was sufficient in filling the Vieira and Petit void just enough to successfully get Champions League football through league finishes year after year. This is where Arsenal suffered the most. Whereas the clubs above them now can spend the money that Arsenal did in the early 2000s through increased TV and Champions League revenue, Arsenal were the pioneers and tried to be self-sufficient whilst doing it. Fourth place was celebrated like a trophy win, and their biggest names weren't particularly happy with it. And neither were the board. David Dein, Wenger's major supporter in the boardroom, left in 2007, and any major financial support Wenger had dried up on his departure. No longer were key players being succeeded by adequate replacements. Adams' departure was filled with Campbell and Toure. Anelka's departure was covered by Thierry Henry and Davor Schuker. Campbell's departure was filled with a post-striker Chelsea Gallas and Sagna, and Henry's departure was covered by Eduardo. Expectations from recruitment had dropped to match the lower expectations on the playing field. 2011 signalled the turn of real player unrest. Fabregas finally secured his move back to Barcelona following contract disputes. Clichy and Nasri both went to join the new riches of Manchester City. Experienced, if not spectacular, Abue was replaced by 16-year-old Hector Bellerin. Jens Lehmann also retired that summer, and the arrivals were budget moves at best. Mertesacker initiated a long legacy of disappointing, if not committed, defensive signings. Mikel Arteta and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain were supposed to fill the Nasri-Fabregas holes, and Gervinho was touted as the next Henry upon his arrival. Murmurs amongst the Arsenal support were beginning to suggest that Wenger's ability to spot young talent and sign players for good value was on the wane. However, his hands were tied behind his back by the board on most occasions, and Wenger was simply getting the best out of the resources available. Upon Wenger's arrival to the Premier League, Arsenal didn't just secure the signing of a pioneering technical coach. They also inherited a brand new scouting market that English clubs hadn't tapped into previously. Outside of Marseille, PSG and Monaco, Ligue 1 was a barren wilderness for British clubs. Wenger knew where there was talent to be found, such as Robert Pires at Metz, and with the French scouting network came untapped scouting access to the best academies in Africa. However, by the time that the Emirates was built and Arsenal were desperate for the next generation of budget signings, the whole world was scouting Africa, and Barcelona's La Masia, Arsenal's scouting hotspots of choice. The only exclusive market Wenger had unrivaled access to in the modern game was mid-table and lower-tier France. Koscielny, Giroud, Gervinho, Yaya Sanogo, David Ospina, Reina Adelaide, Bennacer. All solid signings from French football, but not players that were ever going to win the Premier League without marquee players around them. A trio of FA Cup victories from 2015 to 2018 attempted to cover up the growing cracks in the Arsenal project, and Wenger's ability to secure top four football in consecutive seasons was admirable in helping the club maintain a steady bank balance. But the football on the field was growing increasingly frustrating for fans of the club. Wenger out banners had become a mainstay in the stands, and outlets like Arsenal Fan TV made a name for themselves demonstrating their anger and providing a space for fans to vent their frustrations amongst themselves. Wenger's expected departure was imminent, and some desperate signings were made to bring success to the club in what would be his final season, and to hopefully keep the fans on side. Aubameyang, Lacazette, Xhaka and Mustafi were all signed for over £30 million each, with a view to building a strong side ready to hand over to a new manager. This move failed though, and Arsenal finished 6th in Wenger's last season at the club, therefore not qualifying for the Champions League. One season's failure was all it took for the Arsenal fans to voice enough concern for the board to listen, and a hastily prepared resignation in May that year ended a 22-year reign as more than a manager of Arsenal Football Club. Wenger was the head coach, the technical director, the accountant, and the father of modern-day Arsenal. The hostility of a section of the fans and the board was unjustified. It was very brutal. Three-time Europa League winner with Sevilla, Unai Emery, was the man charged with improving Arsenal's fortunes after Wenger's departure, and it was deemed that the Spaniard would be desperate to prove himself following a disappointing spell with PSG. Ultimately, it didn't go well. Originally trying to play dominant, progressive football, Emery quickly fell back to a defensive, pragmatic approach that the Arsenal fans despised. Uninspired signings, such as Lichtsteiner, David Luiz and Nicolas Pepe, were meant to rejuvenate the squad, but the fans felt detached from the side due to the departures of long-serving players such as Ramsey and Koscielny, as well as the letting go of perfectly good homegrown young squad players like Iwobi, Jenkinson and Wilshere. Whilst they may not have been stars of the club, they were locally developed players that carried the old identity of the club for the fans, even if they weren't of the required standard, and as such, the squad started to feel like an assembly of unwanted talent from Europe's top clubs, rather than a strategically assembled and cohesive unit. Emery subsequently lasted 18 months, and Arsenal entered an existential crisis much like post-Ferguson Manchester United, but without the financial muscle to pay their way out of trouble. One big roll of the dice later, and the current manager entered the fold. Mikel Arteta was the highly valued assistant to Guardiola at Manchester City, and a former player at Arsenal who was destined to bring back the glory days and the spirit of Wenger's successful Arsenal sides. One problem. Arteta wasn't the prodigal tactical son of Wenger that people seem to remember. Arteta was a La Masia graduate who found his way to the Emirates during their driest trophy spell after spells with Rangers and Everton. He's more of an alumni of the David Moyes school of coaching than Wenger, and with each passing game day I get the impression he was valued by Guardiola for being Spanish but understanding the British game, rather than any tactical nous. As it stands at the making of this video, Arteta is trying to bring through youth team talent like Smith Rowe and Saka, whilst fighting to qualify for the Europa League. And following toothless defeat in the Europa League semi-final to Unai Emery's Villarreal, the most impatient sharks of Arsenal support are already swirling, ready for his demise. Perhaps he'll be given time, and strike gold with some key signings and youth talent. More than likely, however, he'll fight tooth and nail to hold on to his job until the board decide it's time for change and hope that works too. Whilst Arteta's management career is in its infancy and he has plenty to learn, this situation is definitely not all of his own making. It's of no coincidence that Arsenal's downturn in fortunes on the pitch started since David Dean's acrimonious departure in 2007. Wenger's right-hand man fighting his corner in the boardroom had gone, and the manager now knew that the people left running the club were either the ones that didn't want him back in 1996, or new board members from recent controlling purchases that prioritised financial stability over on-the-pitch success. The worst of Arsenal's performances in the league coincide with the power struggle over controlling shares, and today's situation where fans want the current chairman out is only going to exacerbate the situation. The cost of the Emirates Stadium is still locked in bonds and loans until 2031, and in the meantime, Arsenal have an average net transfer spend of only £23.3 million since 2007, as opposed to Chelsea's average spend of £48 million, for example, and even that's boosted by recent seasons' desperate signings of players like Xhaka, Mustafi, Aubameyang and Lacazette. All this, with foreign ownership enjoying all the benefits of owning a successful merchandising venture, a popular, well-supported football club with vast history in English football, as well as being the deed holders of prime real estate in one of the most expensive areas in Europe. So why is the ship sinking? Arsenal is currently undergoing a monumental identity crisis. Its fans want a swift return to the glory days under Wenger at the turn of the millennium, and its owners want stable economic returns until the debts of the Emirates Stadium are paid off in full. At that juncture, they may decide to splash their cash, but in the meantime they're tightening their belts rather than speculating to accumulate like they're playing rivals. This is most likely their rationale behind wanting the increased revenues from the proposed and seemingly failed European Super League, but the disassociation with their fans is ever increasing. There is an apparent need for the club to make its mind up regarding the direction they want to go in. Either dampen supporters' expectations and find a management team capable of delivering the maintained top 4 success of Wenger's final decade, or move towards the modern model of spending what is required in order to build a squad capable of challenging for major honours. Currently living in limbo, wanting to maintain Wenger's legacy of overachievement on a budget, yet not giving the resources to even achieve that, is only going to increase the frustrations of the fans and force changes in the boardroom and the dugout in response that could very well lead to a generation of perpetuated instability and lack of leadership. Thank you for watching the whole 18 yards. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out my previous video exploring the success of Red Star Belgrade, as it will help the channel grow immensely. Also, if you have any questions on this topic, please comment below, and I will endeavour to address any points raised. Remember, new videos are out every fortnight, Saturday at 3 PM. Goodbye for now.